Thank you for making time for Health Diary. My name is Gladys Gashanja, coming to you from the 4 Points by Sheraton here in Hallingham. Now, when people hear of eating disorders, especially in the African or Kenyan context, first thing that comes to mind is, those are Western problems. You know, hizo ni shida za wazungu. Truth is, eating disorders are not a respecter of gender, race, or even age. Now, this episode of Health Diary will put that into greater perspective, even as we meet some that are living this reality. Starting off with this fact of a matter. Eating disorders refer to persistent eating behaviors that negatively impact your health, your emotions, and your ability to function in important areas of life. Most eating disorders are caused by overly focusing on one's weight, body shape, and food. The most common eating disorders are anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and binge eating disorder. Eating disorders often develop in the teen and young adult years, but can develop at any age. These disorders are often chronic, however, with treatment, you can return to healthier eating habits and sometimes reverse serious complications. So what are eating disorders, you may ask? Well, let's find out today. And to help us with this, we have Dr. Catherine Mutesia, who is a consultant psychiatrist, and Zaria Gikonyo, who is a mental health advocate. Thank you for your time. Now, Daktari, these eating disorders are said to be serious conditions related to persistent eating behaviors. What leads one to this path from your experience?
There are various types of eating disorders, and there are multifactorial causes. There is definitely genetic predisposition. There is also the environment, and that's why we are seeing now, with a lot of exposure to social media and being able to access information from the globe, then people are getting impressions which might not be the healthy way of perceiving your body image. Many people suffering from eating disorders also have lived with anxiety for a while. Some get depressed, and there's a lot of suicide attempts and suicides among especially anorexia nervosa.
Now, before we get to the different types, tell me this. Are you saying you've never come across anyone with an eating disorder that was not struggling with a mental illness?
Not quite, because many of them will not come to us and say, I have an eating disorder. They'll come to you with depression, and then as you observe them, severe depression, or even with a suicidal attempt, or some will even have missed their periods, monthly period. So somebody with a low BMI, or let's say low weight for their age, then you want to know what is causing it. Of course, depression itself can cause loss of weight. We are seeing many young people buying drugs used for ADHD to help with weight control. So it is not as rare as we think, and it's not a disease of the West. And now we are a global village. Instagram gives you everything. Social media gives you everything. You Google, you'll get... And now there are many diets, and sometimes it pushes you to the extreme.
All right. So at this point, let's understand Zaria's journey with an eating disorder. When did this come to mind or to the fore?
I think it's always been there, but I didn't realize. And then when lockdown happened, you know, you're eating a lot, and then so we started working out in the house just to keep busy. But then you're working out and you're not seeing any result. And then at the time I had really bad depression. I've struggled with anxiety for such a long time. Like, it's something I've never been able to grasp and like cope with. And so I told myself, this is the one thing I can control. I can control what's going in my body and what's coming out of my body. So I would eat, and in my mind, I would say that if I've eaten this food, if I remove it, then it doesn't count. Like I had apps that I would count my calories. Sometimes I would just get food so that I can throw up, because I was getting this euphoric feeling, and I never understood what was going on. Like I was like, am I addicted to throwing up? And that's when I told my doctor, and he was like, yeah, you get a euphoric feeling. And because I had suffered with substance abuse because of an illness, the euphoric feeling I used to get when I was drugged up, that's what I would get for a few seconds when I throw up. So I did a lot of research. I watched videos from people in the States, and actually when you throw up, the opiate receptors in your brain go off. So that's why you get that high feeling. So I would literally just eat to throw up. So I would do it multiple times a day. And I remember the first thing I threw up was a burger. And because it's so heavy, when it comes out, there's more force. So that euphoria is even more.
Wow, let's stop right there,
Yeah.
Daktari. I hear euphoria.
Yeah.
There is something that happens when you actually throw up that gives you the addiction, as she puts it, and also the need for control. Explain that.
The main issue with the eating disorder, specifically anorexia nervosa and bulimia, would be, first of all, the fear of gaining weight. And of course, they are very worried about their body image. So if I believe that this energy-giving food, these calories I'm getting in, I finally put them out, then there's that euphoria of achieving your goal, because you're fearing to add calories into your body and you're fearing to add weight. And we know clearly that the less you eat, the less you add weight, and you have the ideal body image. So each person experiences different things depending on what else they are going through. Not everybody feels the same.
Which also explains the control, the need to feel in charge. Okay, so Daktari has touched on the types, bulimia, anorexia. You were diagnosed with?
First, I was diagnosed with bulimia. Then I was diagnosed with anorexia. So I didn't understand. I was like, how can I have both? And I was told that sometimes they come hand in hand. So I was diagnosed officially this year, April. And from April to now, I've lost 14 kgs. And it got to a point where it wasn't intentional. Like I was just losing, like I would literally look at food and I was disgusted. There was a time I was scared of food. So I'd be called down for dinner and I pick a plate and then I walk around, then I disappear. Because the sight of food, the smell would just make me sick.
All right, so you started off in charge, then it took over. Yeah. So Daktari, would you classify it as an addiction?
When you are diagnosed with bulimia, then the doctors will definitely discuss with you the dangers of throwing up, because one, you're getting out potassium, phosphates. So you get to understand the physical problems you're getting by inducing the vomiting. So when somebody is well educated on that, then they decide, since if I get this food inside, for me to get it out, I'm causing more pain, I'm causing more problems, then the easiest thing is not to get the food inside. And we all know when you don't eat, then your body learns to burn your own fat to give you energy. So naturally, if you starve your body learns to live without the food. Your appetite goes.
So that would explain why there's a combination of bulimia and anorexia now.
Yes. Most of the time it tends to change because now you've been educated. This is very dangerous because sometimes even your vomiting food could go into the air pipe. And that would even cause severe reactions. So after you're educated on that, then you decide probably subconsciously. I'm not saying you decide you decide I'll do this. Subconsciously, then you decide, then if it's dangerous to get the food out, let me not get it in.
So we've talked about bulimia, we've talked about anorexia, and I think you've explained how each can actually, actually be seen to, cause damage to you. Which other types of eating disorders have you come across?
Binge eating, there are people who will eat a lot within a very short time, and they feel like they're in control. And some typical examples would be they would eat when they're hiding. Because if you all see me merging food in 2 hours, I have eaten so much, like food for 5 people in 2 hours, you'll look at me and I'll get embarrassed. Of course, there are other disorders like restrictive eating habits, where somebody decides, I'm a vegan, I'm not eating meat, and it's not that they're allergic to meat, or somebody decides wheat, anything to do with wheat is a no-no. So even if they go for a family dinner and that is what is available, they can't eat because they are stuck that my food should be gluten-free, or my food should have no sweetener at all, or my food should be... So it becomes an obsession. There's also a disorder called pica, where people eat non-nutritious material. Like you've seen pregnant women eat soil, some of them. You've seen kids eat soil or
stones.
Nutritious material. But we also have to exclude that the child does not have intellectual disability, and that you are not lacking minerals, because iron deficiency can cause that. Some disorders like thyroid disease can also cause that. Yes.
Okay, now we'll take a short break at this point, but when we come back, I'd like to understand the physical and emotional symptoms associated to this, apart from what you've mentioned, Zaria, and of course, understand the complications that come with eating disorders. We'll be right back. Thank you for staying with Health Diary. My name is Gladys Gashanja. Eating disorders is a conversation of the day. We still have Dr. Catherine Mutisia, consultant psychiatrist, and Zaria Gikonyo, who is a mental health advocate and also living with an eating disorder. Now, let me understand these physical symptoms that you're talking about. Apart from the loss of weight, what else called to their attention that something was wrong?
I was getting really bad acidity, reflux, and then my throat was really irritated. So I was always clearing my throat. Sometimes I would lose my voice, and then I would cough a lot. Like it still happens today. I started getting tachycardia, and no one could explain why I was having fast heart rate, because my heart rate was sometimes 130, and I'm just seated.
Some have said that they have issues with their dental. Is this something that you had to deal with?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
Out of all those symptoms, what made you go to hospital? What brought about the diagnosis?
Stomach problems. Yeah, because it was really painful. And I was just like, no, this is not normal. Like, I can't be throwing up more than 3 times a day, and I can't be hating food. People, or I can't be forgetting to eat. I tell people I forget to eat, and people are shocked, but I actually forget to eat.
Okay, so at this point it would be prudent to mention that Zaria sees a psychiatrist, so they would understand how this was coming around. So, Catherine, what are these symptoms that are so telling that somebody is dealing with an eating disorder? Because some of these disorders, people know how to hide very well up until when now things are bad.
Physically, you will see, of course, the weight loss. But you see, somebody could be exercising and they're saying, I want to have this, cut my weight, and you think it's okay. Up to the point where some will even... stop having their periods when they had already started. Some will start being weak. And because when you throw up and when you're not eating, you're also not eating vitamins. So it means that even the feel-good hormones like serotonin, hormones which control anxiety, are not there in your brain. So now you start getting depressed, you start getting anxious, Now you start having biochemical changes, and somebody will be commenting they are small and they still think they are overweight, especially for anorexia nervosa. There are other disorders like night eating. There are people who constantly have to eat at night, find themselves eating at night. Let me not laugh because it's a struggle. And you know, when you're eating at night and you're going to sleep, all that gets piled. So with time also, you start struggling with obesity. Yes.
And even as we talk about some of the risk factors, even teenagers, there's normally that age where we're all trying to, we're struggling with identity. Do you see a lot of teenagers?
Yes, we see a lot, and even high school girls. And people will, even in school, you're in a boarding, you're coming home, you've lost weight, but you tell your parents, I don't like the school food. And over the holiday, your parents will just think it's because that you haven't compensated yet, or they will not eat. But also, we've seen adults get into it. Also, careers which require emphasis on being slim, athletics, those are careers which really can push you, because if you are modeling, you're expected, society, I don't know where that came from, that you're expected to be very thin. There are many people who think that eating disorders are for the big cities, people living in the big cities and the elite and the rich. But surprisingly, as I have had to treat people from the counties, because as we know, every county has competitions for Miss County of that county, and they end up now finally competing for Miss Kenya. And some of them would end up being pushed to the point where they develop a eating disorder. And for them, when they even lose out in the competition, that also becomes a trigger. Oh, I lost because I wasn't the ideal weight, not considering that even compete for those post you have, they also check your intelligence and articulation and what you're fighting for. Like Zaria here has a very worthy cause. She wants to help people who have suffered with eating disorders. So the key is to check your weight and compare it with your height and make sure that you're in the normal BMI, the body mass index. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, so for purposes of this conversation, Zaria, for you, you said you might have had it for a while. How far back now in retrospect do you think you were struggling with it, just did not know what it was?
I would say maybe 2017. Yeah, because also 2018, I had lost a lot of weight. I would find any excuse to throw up, truthfully, and any excuse not to eat. And because my parents weren't around, I was living by myself, no one would ask me.
Okay. All right, Daktari. More women than men are bound to be susceptible to eating disorders. Have you seen this in our context?
Yes. In fact, there are more women. Sadly, they are rare. Let me be honest. I haven't seen a man suffering from anorexia nervosa. I haven't treated one. But I've seen men suffering from bulimia, binge eating, and the others, like the night eating. Pica, I've seen it more also in women and children. But even in the West, it is also the same. There are more women than men.
Okay.
Yes.
You've interacted with perhaps a couple of people who are living with eating disorders. Mm-hmm. Any men? Really?
No.
And perhaps it's because they can't come out to talk about it? Yeah.
Because it's also hard for women. Yeah. And that's why I said I have to talk about it, because when I was first diagnosed, I was like, wait, I have no one I can go and talk to. Even like finding a therapist who knows about eating disorders was hard. And I just felt alone, because sometimes I would sit in the toilet for hours, just crying and staring at the toilet, trying to convince myself not to throw up. And that's when I realized, I'm sure there are people going through this, but they're too scared to talk about it. So I felt like I should start that conversation. And when I did that, people reached out to me, and then that's when I reached out to an organization, and I asked them whether they could start a support group. And I've been working with them to start a support group for eating disorders.
Which brings to the question, Daktari, can you be cured of an eating disorder?
My answer is it can be managed, not cure as in say you've completed a dose, the way you complete a dose of malaria, now you're free. It could keep recurring, and that's why you need to keep your appointments. And whenever there's a stressor, to even be watched carefully. I will not say that you will get a dose and get well. You have to be followed up.
Okay, so now that we're talking about treatment, there's a cost to it, and I'm just wondering, do insurance companies actually recognize eating disorders?
Not that I know of. This medication is so expensive, so even if you have an outpatient cover, it'll be done like within 3 months because it's so expensive. And you also have to consider therapy, you also have to consider going for your reviews. Most of the facilities we have very few facilities that actually deal with mental illnesses, but I've never gone into a place and said, I have an eating disorder, and they believe me or they know what it is.
Okay, which points to the stigma around it.
Yeah.
Have you faced it since you came out?
People make comments, they ask me, oh, why can't you just eat? Or, you know, there are people who don't have food. And I'm like, it's not how it works. That's not how it works. But through my story, someone could like feel better. And at the end of the day, for me, that's the goal. And whatever comments you want to make, I think I can take them. Sometimes they do get to me a lot because at the end of the day, I'm human and I'm still in recovery. I think sometimes people forget that.
If there is no support for such disorders, then it makes it a bit more harder for somebody to follow through with treatment.
Yes, it is.
How do you handle this?
Because the therapy sessions have to be quite frequent. And if somebody has lost a lot of weight, you need to admit them. And the severe cases, like the ones who are in danger of dying, then they need parenteral feeding because they will not accept to take orally. So either parenteral feeding or in severe cases, even having to put a tube until the person can come up to the point where they accept to eat. It can be quite expensive. Insurances they'll think it's self-harm, you're doing it yourself, which is not fair because in the West, all mental health conditions are covered. In Kenya, eating disorders will not be covered, which is clearly discrimination. And actually, even the law says that you should not discriminate somebody based on their illness. We need to support people. And interesting, most of people or most doctors who are not psychiatrists and are not therapists and are not counselors might not even be aware. So I'll be treating you for other things, and there are many people who will go to the gynecologist to be investigated for amenorrhea. Periods have disappeared, and the gynecologist may never think it's about your eating habits. I believe by raising awareness, everybody is getting conscious that it's there. It's not a disease of the West. I have told you even 2003, people are still dying of anorexia nervosa. People are still dying of complications of bulimia when they have lost the important vital vitamins and minerals in their body. So it is there, and it has been there.
Wow. Yes. Okay, even as we bring this to a close, you said you've come out and you will take, quote unquote, a risk to put yourself out there just so that you can save one more person from themselves. How is it going so far, and what more needs to be done?
So far, I think it's going well. But I always feel like there's more I need to do. I think I'm usually really hard on myself. So I always feel like there's more I have to do. I need to, start this support group. I need to start this. For me, the law will play a big role. And also for people to be more accepting and for people to be there for each other and to be kind to one another. And mostly to parents. If we don't have support from our parents, then where will we get it from?
Very well said, and I think it's important that we remember that eating disorders, as said here, is a mental illness. So let's remember that this reality is with us, even though we are Africans and Kenyans at that. Thank you for joining us on this session. Zaria Gikonyo, mental health advocate and herself living with an eating disorder, and of course, Dr. Catherine Mutisia, who is a consultant psychiatrist. Time now for a health tip.
Fluoride toothpaste is very important in prevention of dental caries or decay of teeth. However, it should be in the right amounts because, again, fluoride, like all of us know, can cause dental fluorosis if in excessive quantities. Fluoride toothpaste for kids, we should be very careful as parents because we are only supposed to give them a pea size of the toothpaste, and we make sure they spit so that they don't ingest, because continuous ingestion of toothpaste that has fluoride can be detrimental to development of the other teeth.
I'm sure today's episode will elicit a lot of reflection, especially when it comes to eating disorders. Thank you for your time. My name is Gladys Gashanja, coming to you from the 4 Points by Sheraton here in Hurlingham. Until next time, see you.